They say home is where you feel safe. For me, home was where dreams went to die. My name is Madison Lane. I'm 33 years old, live in Chicago now, but I grew up in a small Indiana town where your worth was measured in two things: obedience and appearance. And according to my mom, I failed at both. You'll never be anything special, Maddie, she used to say, every time I came home with a B+ or dared to wear something she didn't approve of. You think the world owes you something just because you're sensitive? No one pays for emotions, sweetheart. I was 10 when I first heard those words. 10. Most kids at that age get tucked into bed with bedtime stories. I got told I was forgettable. My mother, Evelyn Lane, was a respected woman in our community, vice president of operations at the town's biggest tech firm, efficient, polished, admired. To outsiders, she was the picture of strength and sophistication. At home, she was a storm in high heels, and I was always standing in the path of her thunder. You should be more like your cousin Rachel, she'd say every Sunday at dinner. Look at her grades, look at her posture, look at how she speaks, confident, poised. You walk into a room like you're apologizing for existing. I learned early that nothing I did would be enough. When I made the honor roll, she said, "Well, that's the minimum expectation. When I got accepted into the state university, it's not Ivy League, not even close. When I said I wanted to start my own business," she laughed, right to my face. "That's cute," she said. "Maybe you can sell lemonade too, or handmade candles." Those failed fast too, didn't they? But here's the thing. It wasn't just her words, it was her eyes. That look of disappointment like I'd ruined her personal brand just by being born different, more creative, more idealistic, less obedient. I spent most of my life thinking maybe she was right. Maybe I wasn't meant for more. So I tried to mold myself into someone she'd finally approve of. I enrolled in a major I hated, took a job I despised, dated men she liked, smiled through dinners where every achievement of mine was met with a sarcastic, "How nice," while my cousin's engagement ring got passed around like royalty's crown jewel. But the lowest point that came when I got fired. 3 months into my first real job, a marketing analyst role at a mid-sized tech company, the same company my mom once worked at, a company she raved about for years. I was working 12-hour days, skipping meals, doing everything to prove myself. Then one Friday morning, my manager called me in. "We're letting you go, Madison. You're just not the right fit here." That was it. No feedback, no warning, just out. I walked home in a daze, still clutching my badge like it meant something. I didn't cry until I got to my tiny studio apartment. And when I called my mom hoping for maybe a word of comfort, she laughed. "I told you," she said, "you're just not cut out for the real world." Those 7 words shattered something inside me. But something else lit up. It wasn't rage, not yet. It was a quiet decision, a whisper from the deepest part of myself that said, if they won't give you a seat at the table, build your own damn table. And that's when everything started to change, because the girl my mother said would never be anything. She's about to buy the very company that fired her. And when she does, she'll make sure Mom finds out the hard way. I still remember the morning I got hired like it was the golden ticket to some fairy tale that was finally turning in my favor. Freshly graduated, debt-ridden, and desperate to make my mark, I walked into the glass-paneled lobby of Viridian Dynamics, the mid-sized tech company where my mom had worked for nearly 15 years. She wasn't there anymore. She'd retired early after a strategic disagreement with new leadership, which, knowing her, probably meant she called someone incompetent a little too loudly, but her legacy lingered. "I'm Evelyn Lane's daughter," I said proudly during the interview, like it meant something. The hiring manager, Ron, gave me a tight smile, the kind that says, we've heard stories. But they still brought me on. Marketing analyst, entry level, nothing glamorous. But to me, it felt like a fresh start, a lifeline. For the first time, I thought maybe Mom would be proud. Spoiler alert, she wasn't. "You're working in marketing," she repeated when I called to tell her the news. "That's one step above retail Madison. Don't fool yourself." I should have known that nothing short of becoming the next Sheryl Sandberg would have impressed her, but I didn't let her voice in my head stop me. Not this time. I dove into that job with everything I had, early mornings, late nights. I volunteered for extra reports, taught myself data visualization tools, rewrote entire strategy decks just to make them tighter. I even stayed behind to help the sales team rehearse client pitches. I wanted to show her I belonged. But somewhere around week 10, things started to shift. Ron, the manager who had once praised my initiative, suddenly stopped making eye contact in meetings. Feedback disappeared. My ideas once met with nods now got, "Let's circle back on that which we never did." I brushed it off at first. Office politics, someone else having a bad week. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But then came the warning signs I couldn't ignore. Emails slipping through the cracks. Meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. A project I had built from scratch reassigned to someone else with no explanation. And then one Friday morning, exactly 3 months to the day after I started, Ron called me into his office. His face was tight, corporate neutral. "Madison," he said, folding his hands over his keyboard like he was about to lead a prayer. "This isn't working out." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "You're not quite the cultural fit we expected," he continued. "It's not about your performance. It's just the energy, the direction. It's a tough call, but we're going to have to let you go. Not the right fit." That's all he offered. No performance review, no specific complaints, no second chance. Just a thin white envelope and a politely worded termination letter that said, I'd be paid 2 more weeks and thanks for my time. I remember walking out of that building like my bones had turned to glass. It was raining. Of course it was. I didn't have an umbrella. Of course I didn't. I stood under the awning of a nearby coffee shop, clutching my purse like it was an anchor, and called my mom. I shouldn't have. She answered on the second ring. Yes, I choked on the words but forced them out. They let me go. There was a pause, a sharp inhale, and then laughter. Not the warm kind, the cruel, triumphant kind. I knew it, she said. That place needed excellence, not emotions. This is exactly why I told you the world doesn't have time for little girls who want to be taken seriously without actually being serious. I stood there in the rain, letting her voice cut through me like shards of glass. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer help. Just one final blow before hanging up. Maybe next time, try not to embarrass yourself and me. Click. That night, I curled into the corner of my friend Lexi's couch, knees to my chest, watching the rain blur the city lights outside the window. Every part of me screamed failure. I had nothing. No job, no apartment, no family support, and now no direction. But you want to know the wildest part? That moment, the one where I thought I had officially hit rock bottom, was actually the beginning of everything. Because when the world stops seeing you, you have 2 choices: fade into the background, or make so much noise they'll have to look up. And I was done being invisible. If you've never cried on a public bus holding a garbage bag filled with your belongings, trust me, it's not the kind of movie moment anyone dreams about. Lexi had done what she could. She gave me 3 weeks of crashing on her futon, feeding me Chinese takeout and wine, telling me I was better than this. But I saw the signs. The polite tension in her voice, the way she started locking her bedroom door at night, the gentle, "So what's next for you?" that always came with a sideways glance at my laundry basket by the window. I don't blame her. She wasn't a savior. She was a friend trying to help. And eventually, she had to draw the line. That's how I ended up sitting in the corner of a shared women's shelter room, 1 blanket, 2 pairs of jeans, and a $27 balance in my bank account. No job, no references. A college degree no one cared about, and a mother who had made it crystal clear I wasn't welcome back home. But there was something else, something small and stubborn. Somewhere between the humiliation and the hunger, I remembered a line I read once: rock bottom isn't the end. It's the solid foundation you build upward from. So I made a promise to myself that night. I would stop waiting for someone to rescue me. I was going to rebuild, quietly, on my own terms. I started by walking the city, literally. I couldn't afford a bus pass, so I walked from community library to cafe to career center. My days were stitched together with free Wi-Fi, borrowed chargers, and 1 refillable coffee that had to last 8 hours. I'd heard about this website, Upwork, freelance jobs for digital nomads and gig workers. It sounded like a scam at first. People paying strangers to write their blogs, fix their spreadsheets, design logos. But the more I read, the more I realized maybe this wasn't a dead end. Maybe it was a crack in the wall. I remembered that I'd once built a basic website for a friend's candle business back in college. It wasn't great, but it worked. I remembered how much I loved solving layout problems, tinkering with colors, researching what made users click. So I created a profile. I borrowed Lexi's old laptop for the first week and scrounged together a portfolio out of old class projects and a few fake mock-ups. The first job paid me $5, for 4 hours of work. I cried when I got that PayPal notification. Not because of the money, but because it was the first time in months someone had told me, yes, you're worth paying. That one job turned into 2, then 4, then 10. I taught myself HTML at midnight, learned basic JavaScript during lunch breaks, watched free YouTube tutorials about user experience design on the shelter's lobby computer while people snored behind me on donated couches. I said yes to every single project, product descriptions, email templates, fixing someone's broken WordPress theme. I worked for nonprofits, small businesses, a woman in Iowa trying to sell gluten-free dog treats. Didn't matter. Every project was a brick. And I was building. Slowly, the numbers grew. $25, $100, $400. I saved every cent I could. Bought a used Chromebook. Moved into a tiny studio with a slanted ceiling and a leaky faucet. But it was mine. And then came the email. A client someone I'd done landing page work for asked if I could design a full internal dashboard system for her wellness startup. It was 10 times bigger than anything I'd done before. My gut screamed, say no, but my fingers typed, absolutely. When do you need it by? That job changed everything. It pushed me into real software. I learned front-end frameworks, back-end basics, design systems. I was no longer just freelancing. I was creating solutions. People started referring me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was in demand. But through it all, one thing never left my mind, Veridian. The company that had fired me, the office where I used to sit trying to fit in, the place that said I didn't belong. And maybe it was petty, maybe it was pride, but I swore one night looking out my tiny studio window at the blinking skyline of Chicago one day, I'm going to own something they can't ignore. And when that day comes, I hope my mother sees my name on the door. There's something powerful about doing the work while no one's watching, especially when they've already written you off. While my mother posted brunch photos with my cousin Rachel and continued telling relatives I was still in between jobs, I was quietly stacking wins like poker chips behind the scenes. I didn't correct her, not once. Let her have her narrative. I was too busy rewriting mine. By year 2 of freelancing, I wasn't just designing websites, I was building internal tools, data dashboards and custom systems for real businesses, startups, law firms, even a mid-size logistics company that needed a complete revamp of their back-end inventory system. I had taught myself APIs, databases, and basic Python. Every new client was a new class, every deliverable a test. I couldn't afford to fail. But I didn't just want to be a freelancer forever. I wanted ownership. And that idea hit me hard one night sitting on the floor of my apartment surrounded by takeout containers and project whiteboards listening to a podcast about SaaS models, software as a service, recurring revenue, niche tools, low overhead, high value. Something clicked. That night I stayed up until 3 a.m., sketching the blueprint for what would eventually become Cairo, my first real product. It started with a question. Why were so many small businesses using complicated software they didn't understand? I wanted to build something simple, clean, human. A client portal platform with scheduling, messaging, file, sharing all in one place. No bloated features, just essentials that actually worked. For solo lawyers, consultants, therapists, local service providers. The folks who didn't have time to learn 10 systems, they just needed one that made sense. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't revolutionary, but it was real. I built the prototype myself in 3 months. No investors, no advisors, just coffee stack overflow and raw determination. I launched Cairo quietly through a landing page, an email list I scraped together from old client contacts in 3 Reddit threads. The first week, 7 users. The second week, 41. Month 3, 500 paying accounts. I still remember that morning. I opened Stripe and saw the numbers $6,248.57 in revenue. Not life-changing, but enough to make my chest ache. I stared at the screen like it was a miracle. I took a screenshot. Still have it. I reinvested every dime, hired 2 part-time developers, got a real designer, bought a better laptop and a better chair finally. No more working hunched over a kitchen stool. By year 3, we had crossed $100,000 in MRR monthly recurring revenue. I hired full-time. My name was now on cap tables. Cairo was in SaaS directories. We got featured in Product Hunt, then Forbes, then TechCrunch. And the whole time, my mother still thought I was looking for office work. She had no idea that while she was gushing over Rachel's promotion to junior partner, I was running a software company with 14 employees, international clients, and 0 debt. She had no idea I'd been invited to speak at Web Summit and turned it down to focus on product growth. She had no idea that the apartment she used to criticize was now paid off in full, or that I'd just closed on a second one across the city, not to live in, but as an investment. She still thought I was figuring things out. And you know what? I let her think that. Not out of spite, but because I was no longer trying to prove anything to her. Her validation didn't pay my bills. Her approval didn't hire my team. Her voice, once so loud in my head, was now background static. I didn't need her to be proud of me. I was finally proud of myself. But there was one name I hadn't forgotten. Viridian. Yeah, them. The company that let me go without warning. The place that told me I wasn't a fit. The same company where Mom used to parade me around like I was her legacy in training. And late one night, as I scrolled LinkedIn, I saw something that made me freeze. Viridian Dynamics was raising emergency capital, revenue down, layoffs announced, a quiet acquisition window opening, and suddenly I felt that old fire return. I had moved on, yes, but this wasn't just business. It was a full-circle opportunity, and trust me, I was about to grab it with both hands. The first time someone called me a visionary, I actually looked over my shoulder, wondering who they were talking to. It happened during a panel I reluctantly agreed to sit on a Women in Tech roundtable hosted by a local accelerator. I was sandwiched between a former Google PM and a well-funded biotech founder. I almost backed out the night before, convinced I didn't belong. But my CTO Brian insisted. "They need to hear your story," he said, "because it's real." So I showed up, told the truth, about starting with nothing, about learning code through a cracked phone screen and borrowed Wi-Fi, about how failure wasn't something that happened once, but something I learned to build through. At the end, a young woman, probably 22, nervous, stood up and asked, "What made you keep going when no one believed in you?" I swallowed hard and answered honestly, "Because I realized I was waiting for permission to become who I already was." That clip went viral. 2 days later, my inbox exploded. Journalists, podcasts, event organizers. "Your grit is inspiring. Your company is on our radar. You're doing something special." But still, nothing from her. Not a call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive comment on Facebook. In fact, when I did see her purely by accident at a distant cousin's baby shower, she said the words that stung more than anything. "Oh, you're still doing internet stuff. Internet stuff." By that point, Cairo had crossed 20,000 active users. We'd landed enterprise clients in 4 countries. Our monthly revenue had surpassed the salary she once boasted about for years. But in her eyes, I was still that girl who got fired and couldn't hold a real job. And I finally realized something. No matter how much I built, she wasn't capable of seeing it. Not because I wasn't enough, but because she wasn't. She wasn't capable of imagining a life that didn't follow her narrow rules, Ivy League corporate ladder corner office. She couldn't fathom that success could look like remote team Slack threads and digital products she didn't understand. It wasn't just that I'd grown beyond her. It's that she couldn't follow. So I stopped trying to pull her along. Instead, I focused forward. Then one afternoon, a rainy Tuesday, I almost took off my CFO, forwarded me an email from a private equity contact we knew well. Subject line: Viridian acquisition opportunity. Are you interested? I stared at it for a long time. Was I interested? No. I was ready. We moved quickly. quietly. I had no interest in headlines or drama. I used a holding company to initiate negotiations, masking my identity, until the contracts were nearly done. It was strategic, efficient, and yes, a little bit delicious. They were desperate. The software was outdated, the leadership fractured, and internal morale in freefall. I had once begged to belong to this place. Now they were grateful for any lifeline. I bought the majority stake in Viridian Dynamics on a foggy Thursday morning, and then for the first time in years, I called my mother. "Hi, Mom," I said. She sounded surprised. "Madison, I just wanted to let you know. I bought Viridian." There was a pause, then a scoff. "You bought what Viridian?" I repeated calmly. "The company that fired me. I own it now." Silence. Then, without missing a beat, she said, "Well, let's see how long you last this time." And just like that, I smiled the biggest, freest smile of my life, because in that moment, I knew I had already won. Owning Viridian wasn't just a business move. It was a reckoning. 3 days after the ink dried, I walked into their headquarters for the first time in 7 years, the same building where I'd once been humiliated, discarded, and forgotten. But this time, I wasn't carrying a resume or praying for validation. This time, I held the keys. The front desk receptionist probably knew, gave me a practiced smile. "Hi there. Do you have an appointment?" "I'm Madison Lane," I said. "I think I'm expected upstairs." Her eyes widened. The name had clearly made its rounds already. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal. Every ding of each level echoed with memories. Memories of cubicles, hushed, meetings of walking out in the rain with a severance letter that felt like a slap. But now they were mine. Ron, my former manager. The man who fired me with a casual, not the right fit, was still there. Senior VP of product, somehow clinging to relevance. I had to hold back a smirk when I saw his name on the restructuring chart. The boardroom was full when I entered. Stale energy, nervous glances. They had no idea what kind of leadership was coming. "Good morning," I said, sliding into the chair at the head of the table, his old chair. "Let's begin." The room fell silent. I laid out the new agenda, a 60-day operational audit, an immediate freeze on executive bonuses, and a staff-wide survey to assess the toxic culture still rotting at the company's core. Then I turned to Ron. "You'll be assisting with the cultural review," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Given your long tenure here, your insight should be illuminating." His jaw clenched. He started but stopped himself. "You're leading this." "No," I said, smiling. "I own this. It wasn't just about Ron, or the board, or the team that once dismissed me. It was about every woman who had been told she wasn't enough. Every first-gen grad who got laughed at in interviews. Every soft-spoken creative who got passed over because they didn't fit the mold. I spent the next month cleaning house. Departments were overhauled. The bloated marketing budget where I once begged for resources was slashed and rebuilt from scratch, powered by actual data and performance, not office politics. The company's dying product line. We sunsetted the worst of it and began planning integrations with Cairo, my other company now thriving more than ever. Employees who had once been afraid to speak up were now joining cross-functional teams, collaborating across divisions and being heard. But the most satisfying part, watching people slowly realize the shift, that the woman they once overlooked was the woman steering the ship now with precision, compassion, and a fire they never saw coming. Word got out quickly. Business Insider ran a piece from Fired to Founder, how Madison Lane bought the company that rejected her. TechCrunch followed Madison Lane's quiet takeover is shaking up corporate culture, one acquisition at a time. And suddenly, all the people who had once ghosted me were sliding into my LinkedIn DMs offering congratulations, partnership speaking gigs. But not my mother. No calls, no emails, nothing. Until I got the letter. It came by mail, the physical kind, like she wanted to make sure I couldn't delete it. Cream envelope, elegant handwriting, just 1 page. Madison, I heard about Viridian. I imagine you're very proud of yourself. I still think you're reckless, impulsive, and too emotional for business. But perhaps I was wrong about some things. I hope you find what you're looking for. Mom. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just that. And honestly, it was perfect, because by then I no longer needed her recognition. Her silence, her skepticism, it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't fighting to prove anything to her. I was proving it to myself, and I had already won, not just a company, but peace. It was a Sunday morning when I finally decided to show up, not for drama, not for revenge, but for clarity. I hadn't set foot in my mother's house in nearly 5 years, not since that final Thanksgiving where she spent the entire dinner praising Rachel's new condo while ignoring the fact I had just paid off my first. But after everything, the takeover, the transformation, the headlines, I figured she deserved to see it for herself, or at least to hear it from me. So I drove 2 hours to my hometown, past familiar signs and empty fields until the houses turned familiar and the air thickened with memories I'd tried hard to forget. I parked across the street in front of the same cracked sidewalk I used to skip over on the way to middle school. The porch was still green. The wind chime still played the same lazy tune. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps, hesitation. Then the door opened. She looked older. Not in a cruel way, just smaller. A woman who used to tower in every room now seemed like a shadow of herself. Madison. She blinked. Did something happen? No, I said calmly. I just came to talk. She stepped aside wordlessly. The kitchen hadn't changed. Same worn countertop, same smell of lemon disinfectant, same sunbeam falling exactly where it always did. I sat at the table I'd once cried at over algebra tests and scholarship essays. She poured coffee, hands slightly trembling, and sat across from me. I heard she said finally, "About Viridian." I nodded. "Thought you might. I saw the article. You really bought it outright." She stared into her cup. "So, what now you came to rub it in?" That made me laugh, not cruelly, just softly. "No, Mom, I came because I'm done hiding from you." She looked up startled. I continued. "For years I measured myself against your silence. Every step I took I asked if you'd be proud, if it would finally be enough. And when it wasn't, when nothing was, I thought maybe I was the problem." She said nothing. "But you know what I learned?" I said, leaning forward. "You can't give what you don't have. You were never proud of me because you were never proud of yourself." "Not really." Her lips parted, then closed again. No denial, no defense. I let the silence sit between us like fog. "I don't need your validation anymore," I said finally. "Not after building something from nothing. Not after creating jobs for people who once felt invisible just like I did. Not after becoming the woman you never imagined I could be." She blinked rapidly. "You think I didn't want to believe in you? I think you were scared to," I replied, "because if I succeeded your way, that's one thing. But if I succeeded my way, then your whole rulebook fell apart." Her shoulders slumped. A long pause. "You always were more like your father," she whispered. "Big ideas, big emotions. He chased dreams too. You know where that got him?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but you married him anyway." We sat in quiet understanding for a long time. Finally, she looked up. "Are you happy?" That question landed heavier than any insult she'd ever thrown. "I am," I said, smiling gently. "I really am." She exhaled, a deep, tired exhale. "Then I guess I did something right, even if I never said the right things." I stood. "Goodbye, Mom." She didn't hug me, didn't cry, but for the first time in my life, she looked at me with something close to recognition, not as her failure, but as her equal. I stepped out into the sunlight, keys in hand, heart steady past the lawn where I once felt small and broken. And as I slid into my car, the same model she used to mock as too flashy, I realized something profound. She never needed to see me. I just needed to see myself. A week later, I stood in the center of Viridian's boardroom, the very room where my professional worth had once been reduced to a polite exit form, and prepared to confront the one ghost still haunting the halls, Ron. He didn't know what today was, not yet. Officially, it was an executive transition planning meeting. Unofficially, it was the reckoning. He walked in 10 minutes late as usual with a self-satisfied smirk and a black coffee, still wearing his reputation like armor, still treating the staff like extras in his personal movie. "All right," he said, flipping open a legal pad. "Let's keep this short. I have a lunch with potential partners." I didn't flinch. I simply slid a folder across the table to him, thick, unmistakable. "What's this?" he asked. "Your legacy," I said, "and your exit strategy." The room stilled. HR was present. Legal, too. I'd made sure of it. Ron glanced at the top page, then flipped, and flipped again. His face paled with every paragraph. It was all there: the toxic surveys, the anonymous complaints, the Glassdoor reviews, the internal memos riddled with micromanagement and gaslighting. The receipts were no longer whispered rumors, they were documented, dated, and about to be made public to the board. "You can resign today," I said calmly, "with a carefully worded thank you for your service email, or we can proceed with the internal investigation and let the chips fall." For the first time in years, Ron looked small. "You set me up," he hissed. I met his eyes. "No, you set yourself up 7 years ago. I just held the mirror." He opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. 30 minutes later, he left the building with a box of personal items and no fanfare. I watched from my office window as he walked across the parking lot, the same walk I made soaked in rain so many years ago. But I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. And then something strange happened. An email. From one of the newer employees, someone I hadn't spoken to directly. It read, "I heard about what you did today. Thank you." For the first time in months, I feel like this place might actually change. Others followed. Notes from staffers I barely knew. People who had been quietly surviving in a culture that crushed innovation and rewarded ego. Now they were speaking, collaborating, believing. And as I walked through the floor that afternoon, I noticed something I hadn't seen in a long time at Viridian smiles that weren't forced. One developer, maybe 24, stopped me near the elevator. "Ms. Lane," she said nervously, "can I just say, it means a lot to see someone like you in charge." "Someone like me?" I asked, eyebrow raised. She smiled shyly. "You know, someone who wasn't handed it, someone who earned it, the hard way." I felt my throat tighten, but in a good way. "Thank you," I said. "Keep building. We've got work to do." Back in my office, I stared at the framed print on the wall, a gift from one of Cairo's designers after our first $1 million quarter. It read, "Do not underestimate the quiet ones. We build empires in silence." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the hum of momentum beneath my feet. The company that once rejected me had now become the platform I would use to rebuild lives, not just products. And as I looked at the sunset slicing through the windows, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of what I could become. I always thought revenge would taste sweet. But as I sat in my office, the corner one, the one that used to belong to a man who once told me I didn't belong, I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. What I felt was something heavier, a choice. Because when you've risen from rock bottom, rebuilt yourself brick by brick, and silenced every voice that said you couldn't, there's a moment where you look back and ask, now what do I keep proving myself? Or do I finally let go? That question haunted me as I flipped through a folder on my desk, a list of Viridian's remaining leadership team. Some of them were complicit in the old culture. Some had simply stayed quiet. Others, I now realized, had been just like me, once overlooked, dismissed, trying to survive in a system designed to crush people like us. I could fire them all. No one would stop me. But what if I didn't? What if instead of vengeance, I offered vision? So I called a meeting. Not just with execs, with everyone. All departments. All levels. A full hands-on-deck, clear the afternoon type of meeting. No agenda, just one message. When they gathered, I stood alone on the stage, no slides, no assistant, just truth. "I know most of you don't know me," I began, "and some of you only know the headlines. But I want to tell you something that no press release can say I've been where you are. I've been the quiet one, the dismissed one, the one who got walked out without warning. And I came back not to punish this place, but to change it. The room was still. This company has been broken, and maybe so have some of you, but that ends now. I told them about the new structure, how promotions would be merit-based, not political, how mentorship would be available across every department, how mental health days would be normalized, and real work-life balance would be enforced, not just promised in HR brochures. And then I said something that made a few jaws drop. I'm not taking a salary for the next year. A pause. Confused murmurs. I built Cairo without anyone's help. I'm fine. This salary will go into a development fund to help train, promote, and support internal talent right here at Viridian. Gasps, then applause. But I wasn't done. Also, I added, I'm opening the floor. Every quarter we'll host anonymous culture reviews, and every idea that rises from those reviews will be presented directly to me. One hand went up. It was Erica, a mid-level developer who had nearly quit 3 times last year. I knew. I'd read the exit surveys. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, not with suspicion, with hope. I took a breath. Because someone once told me I'd never be anything I said, and I believed them until I stopped needing their permission. That moment marked the real shift. Not when I bought the company, not when I fired the people who broke it, but when I chose to heal it. Over the next few months, something incredible happened. Departments that had been at war started collaborating. Promotions went to the right people, not just the loudest. Applications flooded in from talented people who had once sworn never to work here. And clients, they returned too. Because culture isn't just an internal metric. It echoes in every product, every service, every voice your company sends into the world. And as the numbers climbed and the press circled back with their "How did she do it?" headlines, I ignored it all. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about repair. And that's the thing no one tells you about power. Real power isn't just the ability to destroy what hurt you. It's the courage to build something better. I used to think the final victory would be some kind of dramatic make-drop moment, that I'd walk into a boardroom, throw down a contract, and say, "See, I made it." But when it really happened, when the final piece of this story clicked into place, it was quiet. Ordinary almost. It was a Thursday afternoon. My calendar had a 2-hour break between investor calls and a product review. I could have filled it with something productive. Another email, another proposal, another meeting. Instead, I opened a blank document, and I started writing. Not code, not a strategy memo. A letter. To me. Dear Madison, you are not a failure. Not because you bought the company that once rejected you. Not because you silenced the voices that doubted you. Not even because you've built 2 multi-million-dollar businesses from the ground up. You are not a failure because you kept going when no one clapped. You believed in something when the world said, "Prove it." And even when they laughed, you whispered, "I'll show you." You never needed applause. You just needed air. And once you breathed on your own, they couldn't stop you. You're not nothing. You're you. And that's more than enough. M. I saved the letter. Didn't share it. Didn't print it. Just kept it for me. Because the truth is, no headline, no balance sheet, no LinkedIn connection could validate what had taken years to reclaim my identity. It's wild, isn't it? How long we spend trying to prove ourselves to people who never deserved that power in the first place. We shape our lives around their doubts, carry their disapproval like a backpack full of bricks until one day we put it down. That's what happened when I stepped out of the boardroom that day. When I walked into the break room and saw junior employees laughing again. When I got an email from a customer saying, "Your product gave me time back with my kids." That's when I knew. It wasn't about her anymore. Not my mom, not Ron, not anyone who ever said I wasn't smart enough, strong enough. It was about me finally seeing my own reflection and not flinching. Later that evening, as I stepped out of the office into the soft gold light of a setting sun, I caught my reflection in the glass door. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see someone trying to prove anything. I saw a builder, a woman who had constructed her life out of ashes and bruises and unrelenting belief. A woman who had been fired, ridiculed, underestimated, and still rose. And as I walked away, heels clicking bags slung over my shoulder, peace in my chest, I whispered 2 words into the wind. Thank you. Not to the people who hurt me, but to the pain itself, because without it I never would have found my voice. And now that I have it, I'm never giving it back.